It's so good to be with you right here on the India Development Debate on ET Now. I'm Supriya Srinath, and let's move on to a topic that refuses to die out of the headlines for all the right reasons, though. It is a moment of truth as far as the MeToo campaign in India is concerned. The Women and Child Development Ministry, headed by Maneka Gandhi, has set up a judicial panel comprising 4 retired judges to look into the complaints that have come to fore by women from various walks of life. The panel will study the legal aspects of the revelations by the victims and also solicit public views to arrive at a common code against sexual harassment against women at workplaces. The development comes on a day when the big names from Bollywood are beginning to tumble out of the closet, just like from many other fields as well. At the receiving end are leading film directors like Sajid Khan and Subhash Ghai, who are facing charges of sexual exploitation from their crew members and stars. The MeToo moment of reckoning is also there for the Modi government, which is committed to the dignity of women. What needs to be done to make sure the MeToo movement doesn't fizzle out, failing to go beyond a social media slugfest? Why is the government not acting on MJ Akbar? And more importantly, how to take the MeToo campaign to its logical end, which is making India a safer and more dignified place for working women. That's a special topic of discussion right here on the show this evening. I'm Supriya Srinath, and we'll take it across to an expert panel. Sonal Mattu, founder Helping Hands and Advocate, joins us. Rashmi Bansal, author, joins us. Tara Krishnaswamy, women's rights activist, joins us. Rituparna Chakrabarti, executive vice president and co-founder Team Lease, joins us. And of course, it's my pleasure to welcome the first male member on our discussions for all these days, Yogendra Yadav, founder and national president Swaraj India political party. Thank you very much, each one of you, for being with us. And Mr. Yadav, I think it's only fair that I start with you, and I must compliment you on that article that you've written. I think it's a very important choice to be made between public expose versus need for procedural fairness. I will come to all of that in just a bit, but I think it's a fantastic article and must be placed on record. So let's begin with the politics of this first. On a day when the Delhi Commission for Women writes to the Prime Minister to remove Minister MJ Akbar, all that the Prime Minister says in his first public attempt is that the government has worked towards eliminating problems faced by women working in the night shifts and has provided them adequate security during it. The question that I think a lot of us asked and retort is, what about sexual harassment in broad daylight? And what about his own colleague accused of it, not by 1, not 2, but now 8 to 10 working women?
Hi, is that question for me?
Yes, that's for you, Mr. Yadav.
Thank you, Supriya. First of all, I don't think we should be surprised that some men feel offended about sexual harassment, because this is not just women's concern. This is a concern for every citizen, every Indian. And it's only normal in a good society. It should only be healthy that this concern be shared by men and women both. On the point that you've made about the Prime Minister, I'm shocked. I'm very disappointed. We should also notice that in the very first attempt, Rahul Gandhi had also ducked it. Later on, of course, he tried to course correct. The fact is that our political establishment, and not just political establishment, the power establishment of this country has maintained a strange silence, a conspiratorial silence on this question for a very, very long time. And that is why this, what is being called a MeToo moment, is such a significant moment, because it breaks that silence, because it makes something speakable, brings things that everyone has known all these years come out in the public domain. So in that sense, I think it's a very significant moment in our public culture, and that's why it must be celebrated.
I couldn't agree more with you as far as celebrating that moment is concerned, even though there are people who out there believe that this could lead to some frivolous cases coming to fore. My reply to them is standard. Too bad if it does, but at least, laud the women who are showing the courage and the will to come out and call out sexual predators. And I think it takes a lot of guts, it takes a lot of courage to come out publicly and do that. But Sonal Mattu, let me bring this to you. According to Union Minister Maneka Gandhi, the government will form a committee of retired judges to advise it on cases of sexual assault and harassment, publicized, of course, by MeToo. Are you someone who's going to read this as a positive development? Because there are many out there who will snigger and say, yet another panel.
It's a brilliant development and much needed. As a member of internal committees, we are limited to issues that take place at the workplace, and many of the cases that are coming up are actually beyond the workplace. I'm glad that this panel is being set up, and a lot of women who have spoken up where the internal committees cannot help them for want of jurisdiction. I think this panel is going to be an amazing space where they can go speak about their concerns and have their issues redressed. I hope that they're able to do it in a speedy manner without taking too much time. It's already been so late, but I think these women need to get, need to get some sort of closure and need to get justice on this. And I think as committee members, our role is limited to what takes place within the workplace. There are statutory timelines, and I know that this panel will not have these strictures on them, and they will be able to take up cases beyond what the scope is for internal companies to do.
No, I'm glad you say it's a positive development. Even I thought it's a positive development. At least the government is waking up to the need for, looking at this. At least, the government is not being dismissive about this being yet another rant on social media and shying away from taking actions. So from that point of view, it's important because this is perhaps going to look at it far more holistically. My question really, and if I may come to you, Tara, is that this 4-member committee will conduct public hearings of sexual abuse cases. So far in India, about 100 of them have been reported. What will this public hearing really mean? And what will this mean for cases that have been reported just yet? Is this going to be some sort of a framework that will be set for future cases like these? Just to understand this from people perhaps who understand this better, but 100-odd cases reported in India so far, and this committee or 4-member panel will be doing public hearings. So I do want to pick up the point about public hearing and how helpful will that be?
Is that a question for me?
That's right. It's a question for you.
Supriya, is that a question? Yeah. So, first of all, I think it's remarkable that Ms. Maneka Gandhi, the Women and Child Development Minister, has chosen to do this. And this itself is a testament of what happens when you start putting more and more women in positions of decision making. She is perhaps other than Ms. Smriti Irani, they are the two that have really vocally come out in support of this, and this itself is a great start. Now, one of the things that she has said is that this committee will come up with the framework and the sort of the policies and actions that it will take forward, right? So it's not clear exactly how they're going to go about doing what they're going to be doing, and certainly having a single committee that can look into all of these cases, even this set of cases that has come forward, is a little bit ambitious. I would also like to add a couple of other things. One is that, again, we shouldn't fall back, and this is my request to Ms. Maneka Gandhi, is that we don't fall back into, the 4 retired male sort of upper caste judges, right? And I'm not saying this loosely. I'm saying this because representation is extremely important, and the Women and Child Development Minister needs to look inwards to say the reason that she is perhaps even reacting like this is because she is a woman who herself knows what it means when so many women speak up about sexual harassment. We've all gone through it, right? So I think she needs to do the right thing in terms of making sure that there are enough women, and hopefully all women panel, that can hear these cases, because that is what will encourage more women to come forward. That is what MeToo is about, is to illustrate how pervasive this is and also encourage more women to come forward by role modeling it ourselves, by each of us coming out if we've had such an experience and if we are comfortable coming out with it. So that is one thing I'd request of her. The second thing is, ultimately, sexual harassment is a crime.
Okay.
And crime in a democratic country can only handle by law enforcement and the judiciary. So
yes,
this panel, this committee must dovetail into what it takes for the real judiciary and law enforcement to make this happen in a speedy, in a sustainable, in an institutional manner. You cannot have a parallel wing conduct, a justice system. It won't sustain. It's a great start, but it cannot be the end.
No, that's an important point that you raised. You cannot have a parallel judicial system on social media happening, and I think you raised an important point there. This has to move beyond the the shame and tell and go to its logical conclusion, which is a probe, which is an inquiry, which is to punish the guilty. But if I may come to you, Rashmi Bansal, the committee will be looking into the legal and institutional framework which is in place for handling complaints of sexual harassment at work and advise the ministry on how to strengthen these frameworks. There already are guidelines there, and I'll a little later in the show I'm going to break up and talk about each of those guidelines. I will also talk about the internal, the committee, complaints committee. But what sort of review does this require? I mean, Me Too has been a very powerful moment. At least it's becoming, bringing the more scandalous sexual harassment topic onto the mainstream. But what sort of review, what sort of institutional framework, can this committee, in terms of the legal review, do at this stage?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not, really clued into frameworks that are being talked about for this commission. But I just want to say that, this internal complaints committee, suddenly in the last 1 year, people have become aware that this exists and we need to set it up in our company. And even then, a lot of companies don't have it. Okay, a lot of people have it, but they're only implementing it in letter and not in spirit. Okay, because there's a law that you have to have an ICC, you have an ICC. But is it a real priority of the top management to have a culture of working in a manner that makes women feel safe and respected? Because for many, many years, there has been a culture where if I, as a young intern or new recruit, join a company, I find that people whom I look up to, people who are my bosses or seniors, maybe not all of them, but just a few of them, they do indulge in these kind of activities. They flirt with women, or they, disrespect them, and everybody looks the other way. Okay, so that's the culture that exists, that which makes it possible for this behavior to continue. And I think that if there is a zero tolerance policy, that's the only way to change this culture, that people should know that this is not acceptable. So there will be a sort of a transition phase between the old culture and the new culture, right? And today the issue is also that there is no time. Nobody has time to train employees, to induct them, to really familiarize them with code of conduct. Every company is chasing, very ambitious targets. You want to, do more and
no, Rashmi,
earn
that's
more.
an important point. Rashmi, if I may please come in. Okay.
Yeah.
Rashmi, if I may please come in. Rashmi, if I may please come in, because those are exact topics that I want to touch upon. Data suggests 44% or 40% of people refuse to intervene when they see something like this happen. I want to touch upon those topics, and I know those are sensitive subjects, but I'll come back to you in just a bit. Let me just get Rituparno's opening comments as well. And Rituparno, Me Too has brought sexual harassment under the arc lights of public scrutiny, but where does this go beyond shame and tell? And the question that I think we need to ask in terms of forward-looking is there enough fallback of law, of institutions and procedures to move beyond social media shaming?
So I think from as the law goes, I think the law has, the POSH Act has been very well drafted. I believe that the guidelines are such which ensures that there is sufficient representation of women in the committees. It also necessitates that a woman needs to head that committee. There also is a provision where there's somebody who is a neutral party, which means somebody outside the organization who needs to be part of this committee. But honestly, the point is that my worry, Supriya, has been that the Act, most organizations have viewed this particular compliance under this Act clearly from the purview of compliance. And not maybe, I might be absolutely presumptuous, but going a little further and creating an environment where people can freely raise their awareness, going beyond training and communication around the provisions of the Act. I'm not too sure whether we have done that adequately. The law is I think has done its bit in terms of how it is. Of course, the law can be improved to have grievance handling mechanism, whistleblowing mechanism, which is to help women.
Okay, let me take a cue from you and go across to Mr. Yadav. And Mr. Yadav, there seem to be enough laws to protect women. You know, in fact, to the extent that a lot of people say that laws are biased against men and in favor of women. What is the issue here? Is the issue of implementation? And obviously, is the issue also about a choice that a woman needs to make between an internal recourse, you know, going through the internal complaints committee and all of that within an organization, or lodging an FIR and taking the legal recourse?
Absolutely. The real issue is public culture and power and the balance of power. It's not so much about law, and therefore allow me to push you a little on the issue of the logical conclusion is law and crime and punishment. I'm not so sure. This country has one of the strongest laws on rape. The laws on abortion are some of the more liberated laws. We have law on domestic violence, which most countries do not have. We have the Vishakha guidelines. But why is it that none of these was implemented? There is a strong law on rape. Why is it that rape by some of these respectable men was never reported? Is it because there was no law? No, there was law. The real issue is that women did not feel the courage, they did not have the confidence, they did not know that they would be able to articulate these things in public. If 1 month ago on your show I had called Mr. MJ Akbar a predator, you would have probably shut down and said, please don't do that. Today we have the courage. We can say, we can name these offenders. That, to my mind, is very important. Why is it that company after company has discovered internal committee which they did not know till yesterday? Till yesterday they were not implementing it. The real point is naming and shaming. That actually is even more important than the punishment. I doubt if most of them would be punished under law, because the legal requirements of evidence are so stringent, so difficult. I doubt if majority of these cases would ever pass that thing, but I don't care. For me, the important thing is that these sexual harassing offenders are being named in public. They cannot roam around looking respectable. Taking that respect away and making it embarrassing to do what they do is the most important part here.
Right.
Therefore, public hearing, naming and
that's
shaming is important.
Right.
Yes, of course, this movement needs to be taken forward, but for me, taking forward would
Right.
be to take it to other domains where we have not taken it, to take it to small towns and villages where it needs to go. But I think what's happening, let us
Yes,
not
that's an
think
important
that
point.
what's happening is a very partial, small thing. It's a very big thing that's happening.
No, it's a big thing. It's a big thing, and I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more that this is a very powerful moment. In some sense, it's a watershed moment. How many women in India you really thought could come out there, and these are very respected professionals, could come out there on social media, give details of what happened to them? And you're absolutely right, it may not still put the men behind the bar, but it takes away this hypocrisy, it takes away the mask of being dignified men from them. And I think on that, MeToo scores big. But I will go back and talk about the legal recourse, Mr. Yadav. You will have to indulge me there. And Sonal, if I may come to you. Tara, I'm coming to you in just a bit. I know you wanted to come in. But Sonal, from a legal point of view, the point that Mr. Yadav was earlier making, that for most cases, the evidence in cases like this is loose. A lot of women have lived through this trauma and are coming out after years. So they may be text messages that are not there, there may be very loose evidence that's available, an eyewitness whose account may again be called very loose. All of this may not add up to hard evidence in a court of law. So when we talk about legal resource, what sort of a legal resource even this panel could perhaps look at, because a lot of evidence may actually go missing, and it will really boil down to your word against mine.
Supriya, when we're doing these cases as part of internal committees, the reality is that most people don't have evidence, and it could be non-verbal harassment, it could be a conversation that happens in closed doors. The rule of law is that you just need to come to the committee. If you've got evidence, wonderful. If you don't have evidence, wonderful. And I don't know how many people are aware of this, and they do hesitate coming forward because they probably feel, who's going to believe me? I don't come with the evidence. Nobody is walking around with their phones recording every conversation that takes place at work. And I think that's where awareness counts. Wherever we have told women in organizations that this is your right to work in a safe and conducive environment. If you've got a concern, please come up to us and we will look into it. And when the internal committee does an inquiry into these matters, you're not looking for proof beyond reasonable doubt. You're looking for the probability of the incident having occurred. It's two separate sets of evidence that are required. And what we do look at is probability, because I would say, 75% of cases, there is no evidence. Where people have messages, where there has been, where eyewitnesses have been present, or it happens during an office offsite, and there are multiple witnesses to it who are privy to the incident, those are easier cases to do. But there are women who have absolutely no evidence, and we encourage them to come forward and speak, because the law doesn't require you to come with evidence. And I constantly give this example for a lot of women who are at work and who come forward and say, when I talk to this person, he looks at my chest when talking to me and not at my face. What evidence can she get me? There's no evidence that the lady can bring to me, about the incident. So I think that's where awareness matters. You don't need evidence. Just come up to your committee, speak with them. And I've heard a lot about how companies don't have the committee. Yes,
Sonal,
yes,
if I may ask you, Sonal, I want to ask you a quick follow-up before I move on to the others on the panel. You're the legal expert here. For the benefit of our viewers watching this, and perhaps they're unsure of what to do next. They've named and shamed on social media. There is still no action taken. What does one do next? What steps must be followed? I mean, whether it's approaching the NCW or an FIR, can you, for the benefit of our viewers, very briefly explain what does a victim need to do? What is the sort of legal recourse that there really is?
Sure. So if you're working in an organization and the incident takes place at work or as a consequence of your employment, you're a reporter, you're going out to take someone's interview and they misbehave with you, that comes under the definition of workplace. And I always tell companies, don't look at this limitation of 3 to 6 months. Whenever somebody comes up to you with a concern, take it up. If not under POSH, you've got a code of conduct policy that is so strong. Take up these concerns irrespective of when they're raised to you. Our problem is that when people raise concerns to us about employees who are working in the organization, but the incident has taken place in a personal space at a party, or they know each other, out of the office, and there is something that's happened. Unfortunately, the committee internally doesn't have the legal jurisdiction to look into these matters. So please go file a complaint. The relevant sections are 509 of the IPC. There's 354A. There are sufficient provisions in law. I know it's daunting to go to a police station. It's difficult, but get somebody, get a lawyer, get an NGO to help you. There are, there's so much information out there, but don't sit in silence. Everyone's come out on social media, and while many will question the forum that they've chosen to come out, I think it's given them courage, and whatever suits anyone to speak up. These are genuine victims, and I'm glad they're speaking up. So if you're with an organization, the incident has happened while you've been employed or as a consequence of your employment, forget about the time frame. Come up and speak to your committee, and yes, please.
Come up and speak, and the organization should support you. Sonal, give me a minute there, because I want to take this across to Rashmi Bansal. And Rashmi, you were one of the first few brave women, and I know you can't talk about that case because you've been unfortunately slapped with a lawsuit. But a lot of people desisted because even families and ecosystem tells you, court kacheri mein kahan chakkar mein padoge. People believe filing an FIR is a harrowing experience in itself. It may be more harassment to file an FIR today. Is that what the reality on the ground really is?
I think the reality is that yes, families don't support you. A lot of cases, even if you come forward, your family, your parents, your husband, your boyfriend, they may say no, this is, you know, something you should not take forward because it will cause you more pain. And it's true that, you know, taking a case forward does lead to some emotional trauma because you have to keep reliving something which you may have forgotten, which happened many years ago, right? You had buried that thing, you dealt with it, but then to talk about it again, go and file the complaint and so on, it does, you know, continue that trauma for you for a while. But I think I would like to say that there is a change in the way police is now functioning, in the way they deal with you. I think they're quite respectful and sensitive of these issues for women now. And I believe that they don't, you know, ask you the kind of questions that in the past you might expect, right? I think it's a good suggestion to go with an NGO or go through NCW because, you know, then you have somebody who can guide you through the process and hold your hand through it. So even if you don't have the support at home, if you have somebody who's with you, that makes it much better for you. But yes, the issue is that the judicial system is very slow. So even if your FIR is filed and you know, take it forward, the judicial system will not give you that verdict for the next 3, 4, 5 years, as we've seen in other cases like Tarun Tejpal or R.K. Pachori. Right. Where is it? It's somewhere stuck in the judicial system. So that becomes probably disappointing, and many might question, why should I do it? But I mean, I think it's something that you should take forward, because only when we get some verdicts,
okay, you know,
it
Tara,
will send a strong message.
Fair point. Tara, I will come to you on that note. Yes, send a strong message is an important part that you're saying. But Tara, if I may come to you, you know, the fact that justice delayed in this case is going to be justice denied. There are perpetrators who will roam with their heads held high. They will bide their time. There will be paucity of evidence in some cases. And these cases go on. So there are two questions that I'm going to throw your way. Are fast track courts the answer? And also, is there some merit in looking at penalties, compensation, which will make men change their behavior? There have been apologies, we've seen resignations, we've seen inquiries, but the reality is that all of this will amount to nothing unless it hurts. You know, it hurts where it truly does. So is compensation, is penalty, is all of that really something that should be looked at from an organization's
Great
point
questions.
of view?
A couple of points, you know, leading to that. Yeah, one is there were panelists that made the comment about internal complaint committees and how it's, you know, it's difficult for companies to make sure every employee is trained. I would somewhat disagree with that. I myself work in a large IT company. I'm a manager of employees, and the fact is every quarter we are mandated to take out an hour of our time. It depends, the cycle may be once a quarter or once in 6 months, but you're mandated to take an hour of your time. There's software available that goes through, and you have to go through this training that says what constitutes sexual harassment, what doesn't. This is both for men and women, because in positions of authority, right, you have to be careful what you say, you know, how you behave, and you know, and how you act. So we have to go through the training, and we have to take a pledge at the end that says, I will not only indulge, but I will not look at it and look the other way. If I cite instances of sexual harassment, I will report it to my internal complaints committee. I will report it to my HR. There is a process that is available within companies to do this. So to the extent that the companies do have this, there are many companies that implement this training. There are many more that don't, and it can be done because there's software available for it that educates people. That is one. The second, to Mr. Yogendra Yadav's point, I completely agree that we certainly have much more comprehensive laws than we have law enforcement and you know, prompt judicial action. But the fact is, as far as just Prevention of Sexual Harassment in the Workplace Act goes, just as far as that goes, the majority of the working women, almost 80 to 90% of all women that work, do not work in the formal sector. They are farmers, they are domestic, you know, they may be domestic help, you know, they may be sanitation workers. The law simply does not cover their woes, right? So that means even if you're a working woman, for most working women, this law is inapplicable, and there are huge holes that need to be fixed, right? In these, where do you go
Okay.
for a complaint
Right.
if you're working as household help? Where do you
Right.
go if you're janitorial staff? Now, how you
Right.
fix this, in my opinion, has to start
Right.
with zero tolerance at the very
That's a-
top level. The government has to commit to zero tolerance, and unless that happens, it's not going to move forward.
Right. No, but it's going to be societal as much as government. I think it also needs to have a gender sensitization, and that's a point that Mr. Yadav made. Let's take this out of metropolitans and let's talk about the unorganized sector and all that. I think that's a part of my discussion. I'm coming to that in just a bit. But Ritu Parno, recent analysis does show that 99% of harassment cases go unreported, most often due to fear of retaliation. Now here we have these bunch of brave women who've mustered up the courage, who've spoken out, but it is largely feared that they will pay a price for speaking up. The risk being perceived as rebel rousers, organizations may shy away from hiring them. How do you believe companies need to ensure that that doesn't happen?
First and foremost, yeah, I do agree that that is a fear which has prevented a lot of women from speaking up at the right time. However, I think that there's a simple shift which is required, that when it comes to hiring some of these offenders, can we have a zero tolerance policy? Instead of victimizing the ones who are the victims, why not have a clear approach and a clear communication that when we are about to hire somebody, even if there is a whiff or a murmur or a gossip around a person being involved in any such activities, we shall not hire such people, which essentially means that it's now up to the offender to prove their innocence rather than the victims having to prove the efficacy of their claims. That shift in the minds, if that happens, I think women, and of course the legal framework needs to support such instances where any such instance where a company has failed to take action, or a victim or a complainant has been affected or prejudiced against, I think the legal system should support such cases and even go to the extent of punishing such organizations.
Now, before I go across and really talk about the larger point about taking it outside of our metros and outside of our newsrooms and really to the unorganized rural India where this is rampant, I do want to ask a question, and Tara, if I may come to you on this. The Me Too movement is very good, and I completely agree with Mr. Yadav that Me Too has brought out what was perhaps corporate India's, what was perhaps journalism, what was perhaps politics' worst kept secret. Everybody knew about it, nobody spoke about this. So from that point of view, Me Too has delivered. But how does Me Too move to it's not okay corporate culture? Yes, Me Too should be your go-to, but should that be priority? I mean, why can organizations not make regular intervention through prevention of sexual harassment on POSH at the workplace and beyond? I mean, we may have opened a big can of worms here without really knowing how to clean up the mess, and that's a big concern.
Yeah, again, Supriya, I don't think there is a silver bullet on this. The way I see it, it has to be sort of a four-pronged approach, if you will. First of all, the zero tolerance needs to start at the very top of the Indian government, the state governments. And that means that they need to walk the talk. Right? So one of the prongs is awareness. Just like there's an enormous amount of a good PR that has been done around, stopping open defecation. The same thing needs to be done around sexual harassment, that it is not okay. What constitutes sexual harassment? You need advertisements, you need billboards, you need radio ads, you need the Prime Minister speaking on it, you need, Ms. Maneka Gandhi speaking, you need you need celebrities speaking on it, you need many, many people to come out and speak on it, you need ambassadors. That is from an awareness perspective in terms of generally setting the culture, the tone for the country for zero tolerance against sexual harassment. The second is the actual education of people from school level to college level to government employees and private sector employees. Everybody needs to go through some kind of training on a regular basis. You may do it once a year, you may do it once in 6 months. These are all things that can be decided by policies, and you need to have a system in place where there are materials as content that's produced both online and offline, and children go through it to understand what it is, what consent means, what it constitutes, what are the ramifications of it, and that it is plain wrong, and how to seek redressal, right? So that is the second, the education pledging part of it. The third is the actual laws, policies that are constituted to make sure that this is a 360-degree approach that we take. And finally, actual law enforcement and judiciary needs to be lined up in order to act on this in a prompt manner, which is where when the rubber meets the road, it falls flat, right? So to me, it's a four-pronged approach, starting with zero tolerance at every sphere.
Okay, just give me a minute because I want to get Rashmi Bansal onto this. And Rashmi, you know, it's the same workplace. People rarely speak up when they face harassment, and research also shows that at least 40% of people intervene when they observe harassment. More often you laugh away at the sexist joke, you smile, walk away when profanities are used. And you know, I think it's tolerance to things like these that perpetuate it. So apart from making an environment which facilitates MeToo and which facilitates speaking up, it's also about people who must and do not intervene.
Yeah, I think we have to understand this in a larger context that, you know, women working in large numbers in corporate spaces or public spaces is a new phenomena. You know, at one time we looked at more of women being teachers, secretaries, nurses. Then maybe in 80s and 90s we've seen a surge in the number of working women, and now because every woman is getting educated, so she definitely will work for a few years. Some of them leave later on, but every woman has an aspiration to work. So while I agree with you that we should think about rural India and so on, but let's agree that, you know, for a woman to be working itself is a very big and new development. And even today, many women are fighting a battle to be allowed to work. When I travel to smaller towns of India and I meet girls who are studying, even in large towns, girls studying in B schools, sometimes they say that, you know, we are studying here, but our parents are not going to allow us to work. So, you know, there is a concern among parents that, you know, bahar jayegi to kuch bhi ho sakta hai. That is maybe a valid concern too with these revelations coming out. But the fact is that, you know, working is something which empowers women, and therefore women need a safe space, and it's going to take time.
And there can be no two ways about it.
Yeah.
Fair point.
So there's no
I think that's a valid point that you make, but I think the counter argument, yes, I think the counter argument to that is, can we look away from this because, and you know, my other big fear is I hope incidents like these don't make people say, bahar kya karenge, phirne bhej ke, idhar hi rakh ke shaadi kara do. Because that's also what, you know, smaller towns may tend to think, but you know, there are issues of survival there. But I think, you know, I disagree with the other point that you're making, that this is a more working women phenomenon. And Mr. Yadav, you've written extensively on this, because I also believe it's time we take the MeToo movement beyond Twitter timelines, beyond Facebook posts, to everyday sexual violation of the worst kind that goes unnoticed and unreported. You know, your whole point about taking it outside of metropolitan India to the small villages and towns, and that is perhaps where sexual harassment is happening, and they forget about having a voice. They may not even be aware that this is sexual harassment.
Allow me to make one point before I come to this. Not only are 99% cases not reported, not only are 40% cases not attended to even when reported, but even when the cases is proven, when institutions give a formal verdict, even after that things don't happen. I just want to tell you one thing about Delhi University. Delhi University tries a professor, finds him guilty, he goes to High Court, the case comes back to the university, the committee sits again, and formally in 2012 the committee holds this professor guilty of sexual harassment. Everybody clears that, he is punished for 2 or 3 years, and what happens after that? This week, when the entire country is talking about MeToo, that very professor who has been formally held guilty for sexual harassment has been named as the Vice Chancellor of Vishwa Bharati University, the dream child of Rabindranath Tagore. This is what we need to raise voice about. If Mr. M.J. Akbar can be punished, if someone like this professor can be prevented from occupying high positions, this is when the message goes loud and clear. No matter how high you are, no matter how long you hide, in the last instance, you shall face ignominy. That's the message that needs to go out. On the other thing that you said about taking it beyond metropolitan India, absolutely, we need to take it in two directions. One, at the moment we are focused on media, film industry and so on. We need to take it to other things. Politics. Mr. M.J. Akbar happens to have come in because he's a media person. But this is rampant in politics. This is rampant in all other occupations and formal things. We need to take it beyond organized sector to unorganized sector, and I'm glad we're talking about domestic workers because their condition is the worst. People who can't even demand salary, how do we expect them to come out and complain against sexual harassment? This needs to go to the household. Please let us talk about it. Every sociological study tells us that some of the worst sexual violence takes place inside the home, not on streets, not away. Inside homes this is taking place. We need to talk about it. We need to do something about it. Yes, law is a solution. Yes, we need more education. Yes, we need more policy. But please remember, we have reached where we have reached today, not because of law and policy and education alone. It is because of women's movement, because of politics. That is what has brought us here.
Precisely.
And that is what we need to do more of.
Fair point. Mr. Yadav, just hold your thought there because I will come to you for a closing comment there. But Sonal Mattu, I want to come to you, and I think this is a question that came to me impromptu, and it comes from the various, everybody's debating Me Too all the time, and we in office as well. Not the ability of not being able to say no. It's very easy for all of us to sit on judgment and say, why could you not say no for that coffee, or why could you not say no for that outing, or why could you not say no when somebody asked you out. It's very easy for us to sit on judgment, but as a society we are taught to be agreeable. The ability to say no is very tough. It's considered rude. So in that sense, do sexual harassment laws or perhaps organizations within need to talk about the need to say no far too often than we do right now?
Supriya, the interesting thing is that you don't even need to say no. If somebody is sending you messages and you don't respond, your silence has to be construed as I'm not interested.
Yes.
Please back off. I don't need to verbalize my no. And just because I've got a manager who asks me out to lunch or dinner and I go along with him because I'm scared of the repercussions of what will happen if I say no, my consent is not given out of free will. If I'm in an inebriate condition, I don't have the capacity to give consent. And I think these are the situations that people should know about. Your manager, just because you go out for dinner with him and you're uncomfortable and you come to a committee and say, this is what I faced, the committee can't look at you and say, but you consented to go out for dinner. There is no consent. If I say no, what are the repercussions on my career? So yes, saying no is important. Speaking up is important. Telling the person that they're making you uncomfortable is important. But I think that it's time that people start to interpret silence as well. I'm not responding to those barrage of messages. I'm not engaging in a dialogue. I'm ignoring you. I'm blocking you on WhatsApp. Get the message, back off, I'm not interested. And I think that's what people don't understand. There are times where we've conducted inquiries and the person, even after the inquiry, goes back to the lady. And when we turn around and say, you were absolutely prohibited from contacting her, why have you sent her another message? He said, I just wanted to make sure that, she wasn't interested in me and this wasn't a mistake. And it's amazing. And we always need to tell them, well, the fact that she's filed a sexual harassment case against you should be indication enough that she's not interested in you. Get the message. But I just want to go back to two things that you spoke about earlier. One of them was how do we how do we stop hiring people who have a history of being sexual predators? Unfortunately, yes.
Sonal, just give me a minute because I think Rituparna want to come in there, and I think there's a point that has also been made now. And Rituparna, is Me Too failing to realize that social media is not a parallel judiciary system? that can take the law in its own hand, which it seemingly is right now. I mean, I'm also blaming my own brethren, media channels, sitting on judgment, conducting an inquiry, passing a judgment, executing. In some sense, social media is not where the judgment will be delivered. It's a great platform. It's making women speak out, but that is not where justice will be delivered. Ritu?
I couldn't agree with you more on this, Supriya. Social media has its own advantages of actually bringing to the core such issues. I would encourage all the women who have so far taken the courage of coming out boldly and expressing themselves in social media to now follow it through to taking legal recourse. I think there are special courts and special grievance handling entities in the legislative frameworks through whose help they can seek. There are specific NGOs. I mean, sometimes it's a matter of financial backing, whether I would be able to see through the court kacheri ki, all this drama. I think there are support systems, and maybe I would urge media, while we are talking about these issues, we would probably also request the media to talk about all these institutions which exist currently, which can help such women to kind of take on the battle here on beyond social media.
Okay. Okay, Rituparno, just hold that thought, because I've got the last 2.5 minutes on the show, and I will request both my next panelists to be brief. Tara, can Me Too be expected to change the public culture and the discourse on gender? Is that expecting too much out of it?
No, I think that is exactly what it can do. In fact, it has already started doing that. For example, the reason that people are apologizing, the reason that people are even feeling the heat is because, it is the tables have turned from women feeling afraid to speak up to the perpetrators feeling that, look, we are going to get targeted in public. We better apologize. We can no longer run and hide. So it's a fantastic way to apply public pressure. That alone is not enough. It doesn't pervade, the whole gamut of women that are out there, both in the unorganized sector and just people that are not on social media. So much more needs to be done, but that is exactly what it can do as it spreads. The other thing about fast track courts, again, all of these are band-aid measures. Ultimately, when I'm on the street and someone harasses, the guy who harasses me is not only going to look at, shall I do it only in the office? He's going to do it if I'm in the car with him. He's going to do it if I'm in a restaurant. And if he's out on the road and there's another woman passing by, he might do it too. So bottom line, it's a crime.
Yes.
And unless our law enforcement and judiciary in general are improved,
okay,
and
Tara,
I'll
have to intervene
that is one of
there
the
because I'm
weakest links of our democracy, we cannot ultimately fix this.
Yes, we have to fix this in a more cohesive sort of way. But Mr. Yadav, there are two ethical percepts that are in conflict with each other here. And I'm going to quote you on this: the desperate need for public expose versus the need for procedural fairness. The lawyers amongst us and everybody will say there has to be procedural fairness because there are going to be frivolous cases. But at this juncture, since it's exploding and this is our moment of truth, is it all right? Is it now certain that it's all right to let go of that one filter, at least right now?
No, I think what this movement has done is to develop alternative protocols. It's very important that these are not a series of wild, anarchic allegations. Every allegation is backed up by a woman who has had the courage to stand up. The accounts are so detailed, so painfully recorded there. There is a truth to that. And there is a lot of circumstantial evidence which may or may not pass the judiciary's standards of evidence. But there is evidence. And for me, it's very important that we should not relax at least this much. This should not degenerate into wild allegation against anyone and everyone. In fact, we should try and develop ways in which these informal evidence can be formalized, can be recognized under law and procedure. For me, Me Too is a beautiful moment, not just for women journalists, but for India's political culture, India's public culture. But it's a small step in the right direction, provided we take it beyond just media and provided we take it beyond Metro India. Women's movement has brought us here. I'm sure more women, more courageous women will take us much beyond this.
Right, right. And I think we are really at the inflection point of that explosion to happen. First it was media, now of course, a politician who's in the eye of the storm. But we're also getting now on social media, corporate India's worst kept secrets as well. There have been stray incidents being reported from the banking space. So I think this is a moment that's waiting to explode, and the more, the better it is. It's important to call out men there. You know what? We come to work. Treat us for the professionals that we are. We're not a gender, we're not a woman walking in. We're as good as you, if not better. And that's the message that men need to learn. Men need to respect women for the professionals that they are. Leave the gender behind. Treat your wife with dignity. Treat your sister with care. Treat your mother fondly. But with you at work, I'm a working professional. I deserve dignity and respect as much as you do. And that's what this MeToo movement is all about. It has to be, it's not an okay culture. The next step obviously is going to be that. But thank you very much to this wonderful panel, Mr. Yogendra Yadav, Rituparna Chatterjee, Rashmi Bansal, Tara Ramaswamy, and of course Krishna Swamy, and of course Sonal Mattu for being with us in this edition of the India Development Debate. We take a quick breather. We come back with Top 10 at 10.